I fumbled with my keys, struggling to unlock the door while juggling my overflowing tote bag and suitcase. 3 days in Chicago for a client presentation, and I was beyond ready to be home. As the door finally clicked open, I stepped inside, already shrugging off my jacket and kicking off my shoes. Well, look who's back. The familiar smug voice made me freeze. I glanced up to find my cousin Elise lounging on my couch, one hand resting on her very pregnant belly. Her perfectly made-up face twisted into a satisfied smirk. "Elise, what the hell are you doing here?" I set down my bags, brow furrowing in confusion. She languidly stretched her arms over her head before replying, "I'm moving in, dear cousin, temporarily, of course." My mouth dropped open as I gaped at her. "You've got to be kidding me. Like hell you are." Elise let out a condescending laugh. "Oh, Rowan, always so dramatic. I've already cleared this with the family. You've got 2 weeks to move out and find a new place." The room began spinning as her words hit me. "Move out? This is my home that I worked my ass off for years to rent. What gives you the right?" "Family," Elise snapped, eyes flashing as she abruptly pushed herself up from the couch. "In case you've forgotten, blood is thicker than whatever alternative lifestyle you've chosen here. My baby needs a place to live, and your little singleton apartment is perfect." I clenched my fists, anger and disbelief churning inside me. First off, you don't get to judge my life choices. And second, I pay my rent here on time every month. What makes you think I'm just going to hand over my home because you show up pregnant and entitled? Elise clucked her tongue at me in a patronizing way that made my skin crawl. "Don't be difficult, Ro. Mom and Dad agree. You might be able to throw away family values for some big city fling, but I actually have responsibilities now as a mother." A mother, right, the baby. I glanced again at her protruding belly, unable to hide my skepticism and disgust. "You sure the kid is even yours, or are you just looking for a handout as usual?" Her expression darkened at that. "How dare you, you smug, self-righteous little—" The apartment door flew open, cutting off her tirade. My jaw dropped for the second time as my parents hurried in, looking frazzled. "Rowan, Elise, we came as soon as we could," my mother fretted, shooting me a disapproving glare. "I should have known you two would be at each other's throats." My dad put a heavy hand on my shoulder, his tone grave. "This attitude of yours needs to stop, young lady. Your cousin needs support right now. She'll be staying here until she gets settled with the baby. You'll just have to make other arrangements for the next few weeks." I gaped back and forth between my parents and Elise. This was really happening. My own family betraying me on the word of Miss Manipulation herself. Elise shot me a triumphant look, all traces of anger replaced by smug satisfaction. "See, cuz? It's all settled. Now why don't you run along and start packing up your things?" For a long beat I could only stare at them, a storm of emotions raging inside. Shock, fury, resentment, disbelief. This was my home, my life that I had built through years of hard work and perseverance, and they were casually ripping it away with some misguided notion of family obligation. As the weight of their betrayal threatened to crush me, a familiar defiant spark flared inside my chest. Raising my chin, I returned Elise's smug look with newfound determination. "Don't get too comfortable," I promised in a low voice, "because you're not taking anything else away from me." After Elise's shocking announcement and my parents' misguided support for her scheme, I knew I needed to regroup and formulate a plan. But first, I wanted answers. The next morning, I marched straight to my parents' house, anger simmering inside me. My dad answered the door, his usual affable smile dimming when he saw the thunderous expression on my face. "Morning, Ro. Everything okay?" "Cut the crap, Dad," I said, brushing past him into the living room. "We need to talk about this Elise situation right now." My mom emerged from the kitchen, wringing a dish towel between her hands. "Rowan, please, there's no need for that tone." I rounded on her, nostrils flaring. "Excuse me? You two are enabling Elise's ridiculous power play, and I absolutely need an explanation." "Keep your voice down," my dad chided, casting a nervous glance towards the stairs as if we might wake the devil herself upstairs. "Your cousin is going through a difficult time." Letting out a hollow laugh, I shook my head incredulously. "Going through a difficult time? She's straight up lying and manipulating you. Don't you see what's happening?" "Now you listen here, young lady," my dad said sternly. "We're aware of Elise's past struggles. But she's brought a new life into this world, and it's time she grows up and takes responsibility. My mom nodded emphatically. Exactly. This baby is a beautiful blessing, and we need to support Elise through this transition to motherhood, even if that means making some personal sacrifices. The utter hypocrisy and delusion in their words made me want to scream. Instead, I pressed my lips together, reining in my anger as I studied their expressions. Deep down, I knew there was no reasoning with the two of them. Not right now. Elise's sob story and pregnancy had completely blinded them to her malicious intent. Unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head slowly. Do you know how lucky that little parasite upstairs is right now? My mom's eyes widened at the insult, but I didn't give her a chance to object. She manages to snag herself a free ride by exploiting your old-fashioned family values, I sneered, making air quotes. What a conniving, selfish little... That's enough. My dad's booming voice cut me off. His face had flushed an angry red. I won't have you disrespecting your cousin like that in this house. We made our decision, and you're just going to have to accept it. Staring back at their obstinate expressions, I knew continuing this argument would be futile. A bitter taste filled my mouth as I realized the full extent of Elise's betrayal. She hadn't just turned them against me. She'd blinded them through sheer deception. Well, two could play at that game. You're right, Dad, I said, my voice low and controlled now. I need to accept that my own family has turned their backs on me in favor of coddling a liar and a manipulator. My mom opened her mouth, undoubtedly to protest, but I didn't let her get a word out. But mark my words, I warned, holding up a finger. Elise hasn't won anything here. By the time I'm through exposing her for who she really is, she'll regret the day she thought she could take what's mine. Spinning on my heel, I stormed out of the suffocating house. The image of my parents' stunned faces burned into my mind. Let them dismiss my threats for now. They would soon realize I always made good on my promises. As I started my car and peeled away from the curb, only one thought echoed through my mind. Game on, Elise. See if you can slither your way out of this one. After my confrontation with my delusional parents, I was angrier than ever, but also motivated to take action against Elise. I couldn't let her smug, entitled act go unchallenged. She had crossed a line by manipulating my family so thoroughly. First things first, though, I needed to figure out temporary living arrangements while I executed my plan to take back my apartment. That night, over some greasy takeout and a bottle of wine, I rang up my best friend Kate to lay out the situation. That evil little gremlin! Kate fumed after I recapped the whole sordid tale. I can't believe she had the audacity to just roll up and take over your place like that. Believe it, I said darkly, taking another swig of Merlot. Especially when it comes to exploiting family ties for her own personal gain. Well, you can't let her get away with this, Kate insisted. We need to take her down, expose her for the lying snake she is. A feral smile tugged at my lips. Believe me, that's the plan. I'm going to make her regret the day she thought she could one-up me. Kate grinned, the scheming glint in her eye reassuring me I had an ally. Whatever you need, I'm here. My place is open to you too while we hatch this coup. Nodding, I felt some of the tension seep from my shoulders. Even though my own relatives had turned against me, Kate was solidly in my corner. That's what got me through the next couple of difficult weeks. I crashed at Kate's place while quickly seeking a short-term rental to keep my professional life on track. Meanwhile, I also set to work gathering ammunition to use against Elise. I knew from past experience that her sweet, helpless pregnant girl routine was a total act. She'd burned through family members' generosity more times than I could count, especially when it came to money lent but never repaid. Using a few underhanded tricks of my own, I began quietly digging up financial records, ominous social media posts and texts, and other breadcrumb trails from her shady past. I also worked some contacts to uncover unsavory details about the absentee dad of her supposed miracle baby. By the time I was done, I had assembled a fairly damning record of Elise's selfish misdeeds and manipulative ways. It wasn't going to be pretty when I finally revealed it all to our family. One evening, while scrolling through the file I'd compiled on my laptop, a new idea sparked. I smirked as I imagined the look of smug disdain wiped clean off Elise's face. This was going to be deliciously satisfying. I quickly fired off a text to the family group chat. Important update from Rowan. Family meeting at Mom and Dad's place this Sunday at 3 p.m. Please make every effort to be there as this involves all of us. No excuses. The replies came tricking in, ranging from curious to dismissive, but I didn't care. By 3 o'clock this weekend, everything would be on the table, and Elise would learn an important lesson. Hell hath no fury like a woman whose home was stolen. Kate emerged from the kitchen, 2 fresh glasses of Merlot in hand. "What's that conspiratorial smirk about?" she asked, handing me a glass as she plopped down on the couch beside me. I turned the laptop so she could see the file I'd compiled, then showed her my call for a family meeting. Just putting the final stages in motion for Miss Elise's downfall. A slow smile spread across Kate's face as the realization dawned. "You're just pure evil, you know that? I can't wait to see her sorry ass taken down a few pegs." Clinking my glass against Kate's, I savored the anticipation burning through me. Oh, believe me, this is just the beginning. By the time I'm done, Elise won't know what hit her. Showtime. I smoothed my hands over my black slacks, taking a deep, steadying breath as I eyed the door to my parents' house. All week, I had mentally prepared myself for this family meeting, rehearsing what I wanted to say and envisioning Elise's smug expression crumbling. Nothing was going to throw me off my game. Kate gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this. That witch doesn't stand a chance against all the receipts you've gathered." "Thanks," I said with a tight smile. Her support bolstered my resolve. It was now or never to unveil Elise's deceptions. Squaring my shoulders, I rapped firmly on the door. It swung open a few moments later to reveal my dad. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Kate with me. "Rowan, Kate, come on in. Everyone's just settling in the living room." I strode inside, casting a sweeping glance over the assembled family. My mom sat primly on the couch next to a sprawling Elise, whose feet were propped up on the ottoman. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins filled out the remaining chairs, some with skeptical frowns, others wearing looks of curious anticipation. Elise arched one perfectly groomed eyebrow as I approached. Well, if it isn't the disgruntled host returning to crash our little family get-together. Her syrupy sweet tone dripped with disdain. Keeping my face impassive, I issued her a level look. "Save the sugar-coated barbs, Elise. We both know this meeting has been a long time coming." "Girls, please," my mom cut in, wringing her hands in distress. "Can't we simply enjoy being together as a family without all this unpleasantness?" Before she could go any further with the misguided peacekeeper act, I turned to address the whole room, raising my voice to be heard over any objections. "I'm sure you're all wondering why I called this mandatory gathering today," I began, locking eyes with each bewildered relative. "Well, it's because I have finally obtained proof that our dear Elise," I sent a mocking look her way, "has been lying through her teeth this entire time about her situation." A hush fell over the room as I retrieved a thick manila folder from my bag. With methodical movements, I began distributing the contents around the room, printed out bank statements, screenshots of text conversations, even a few grainy photographs. "As you can see," I said in a ringing tone, "Elise has been far from honest about her financial woes, her so-called miracle pregnancy, and the guy who ran off as soon as he knocked her up." Wild murmurs began rippling through the room as every head bent over the paper trails I'd released. Elise's face had drained of color, giving her a sickly pallor. "Lies! All vicious lies, meant to make me look bad," she sputtered, struggling to gain control of the situation. I simply shook my head, holding up a hand for silence that somehow worked. "The evidence speaks for itself, cuzzo. Nice try, though, playing up the helpless single mom act to swindle my home out from under me." One by one, every head swiveled back to stare at Elise, newly enlightened by the secrets now aired out in the open. She squirmed under the weight of so many accusing gazes. In that moment, I could pinpoint the exact second when the stark reality hit her. The jig was up. She'd been caught red-handed manipulating our family's sympathies to fit her selfish agenda. A look of pure venom contorted her features as she shot me a murderous glare. "You're going to regret this," she hissed, cradling her belly protectively. "You have no idea what you've just done." An eager murmur coursed through the room, but I merely let out a hollow chuckle, holding Elise's fiery gaze steadily. Save the empty threats, sis. I'm not the one who messed up here. That was all you. This is just me finally setting things straight and getting back what's rightfully mine. By now, even my parents were sitting in stunned silence, seemingly shaken by the black and white proof of their daughter's deceit. Satisfaction washed over me as I sensed the power dynamic shifting completely in my favor. I'd played my trump card against Elise. Now she'd be forced to contend with the consequences of her own lies and manipulation. And this time, there was no avoiding the fallout. In the aftermath of my dramatic reveal at the family meeting, an unsettling quiet blanketed the living room. All eyes remained fixed on the now visibly shaken Elise, who kept shooting me murderous glares between whipping her head around at each accusing stare. "Well?" I prompted after several tense moments. "Any other lies or half-truths you want to come clean about while we're all here?" Elise opened her mouth but seemed unable to formulate a response. My mom leaned forward, resting a hand on her arm. "Elise, honey, please tell us this isn't all true," she implored in a sickly sweet tone that grated on me. "Rowan is just angry and lashing out. You would never deceive your own family." At that, Elise finally seemed to find her voice again, a hysterical edge creeping in. "Of course it's not true. Can't you see Rowan has clearly doctored or taken these things out of context? She's just bitter that I need some support right now with the baby coming." I scoffed loudly at that. "Need some support? Is that what you call shamelessly kicking me out of my own apartment under total false pretenses?" The accusing mutters grew louder around the room. Elise shot me another death glare. "Nobody is kicking you out permanently," she said with an air of self-righteousness that made my blood boil. "I just need a temporary place to stay until I get on my feet as a new mother. Is that really so unreasonable to ask of family?" I opened my mouth to retort, but my Uncle Steve beat me to it. "Wait just a damn minute here," he cut in gruffly. "If what Rowan's showing us is true, which it sure as hell looks that way, then you've been lying through your teeth this whole time just to take advantage." Elise drew herself up straighter, lips pursing rebelliously. "Well, I never. Can it?" My cousin Jason piped up with unusual heat. Jabbing a finger at the photographs I'd handed out, he shook his head slowly. "Those pictures don't lie, Elle, and they sure as hell don't paint you as some helpless single mom just looking for a hand." A tense silence fell over the room as Elise's mouth cycled through opening and closing again futilely. My Aunt Monica cleared her throat uncomfortably. "I must say, I'm quite disturbed by these revelations as well. To deceive one's family in such a way—" She trailed off, shooting Elise a deeply disappointed look. One by one, nearly every face in the room morphed into identical masks of stern judgment and disbelief, aimed squarely at Elise. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to feel a glimmer of triumph. Not only had I exposed her rotten scheme, but it seemed most of the family was finally viewing it for what it truly was, a bald-faced ploy by a con artist to exploit their kindness and loyalty. A nauseating gurgle of near-hysterical giggles bubbled up from Elise's throat as she eyed the courtroom of accusers surrounding her. Tears shone in her eyes, though I had a sinking suspicion they were more born of anger than remorse. "You outright refuse to help me when I've got nowhere else to turn? After everything, you'd really choose some self-centered brat over your own blood?" Her voice had taken on a dangerous, bitter edge that set me immediately on guard. Before any of us could react, Elise was on her feet, one hand braced on her lower back, while the other pointed an accusing finger straight at me. "Don't think for 1 second this is over, Rowan," she spat, lips peeling back in an ugly sneer. "If you thought I played dirty before, you've seen nothing yet. I'm not going away until I get what I need from this fucking family, and God help anyone who tries to stand in my way." With that ominous proclamation, she turned on her heel and waddled toward the front door, throwing it open. For a long beat she paused in the doorway, tossing one last withering glare over her shoulder. "I'll see you all in court," she hissed, before finally departing and letting the door slam shut with a resounding thud behind her. The silence that followed her dramatic exit was deafening. I slowly let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, adrenaline thrumming through me. Whatever came next, one thing was now abundantly clear. The grudging respect from some family members wasn't worth the dangerous new enemy I just made of my own flesh and blood. Over the next few days, an uneasy truce settled over the family in the wake of Elise's dramatic exit. Most weren't willing to take sides outright, but a definite rift had formed between those stunned by her deception and those still in denial about her motives. As for me, I simply bided my time while casting furtive glances over my shoulder. Elise's ominous parting words had put me on edge, knowing her vindictive nature. I made sure to alert my landlord to the situation in case she tried anything underhanded regarding my lease. Nearly a week after the confrontation, I returned home from an errand to find the lights on in my apartment despite me turning them off earlier. Heart pounding, I quietly stepped inside, ears pricked for any sounds of an intruder. Going somewhere? I nearly jumped out of my skin at the biting voice that sliced through the silence. There in my living room, perched on my couch with a glass of wine in hand, was Elise. "What the hell are you doing here?" I growled, adrenaline thrumming as I registered her smug look. She arched one plucked eyebrow coolly. "No need to get all worked up, Ro. I'm simply here to talk before this situation gets any more out of hand." A disbelieving laugh ripped from my throat as I gaped at her audacity. "You have some nerve showing up here unannounced after the twisted crap you pulled." Rising to her feet with obvious effort, Elise wobbled slightly before finding her balance. "Like I said, let's talk this through rationally. Despite our differences, we're still family." Her tone dripped with sugary sweet reasonability that made me want to vomit. Squaring my shoulders, I stared her down unflinchingly. "I'm done playing your mind games, Elise. If you think for 1 second I'm backing down or letting you slither your way back in here, you're sorely mistaken." Her lips curved in a vindictive smile. "We'll see about that. But first, I want you to know exactly what you've done by turning the family against me." With a dramatic flourish, Elise plucked a folded piece of paper from her pocket and began reading aloud in a cold, even tone. "I can't keep living like this, feeling like a constant burden and disappointment to everyone around me. The cruel words and accusations have become too much." It took me a few seconds to register the alarming words as my heart plummeted. "Elise, what the hell is that?" She silenced me with a look before continuing in that haunting monotone. "Maybe once the baby is born, things will be different. But for now, the only merciful path is to—" "Enough!" I roared, stomach churning. Recognition was slowly dawning, despite my mind's refusal to accept the awful implication behind her words. My gaze fell on the prominent swell of her belly, nausea gripping me. Elise folded up the note with a look of mock solemnity. "A friend of mine found this in my bathroom trash after one of my darker moments. I'd meant to discard it, but she saved me from making a terrible mistake that night." For a long beat, I simply stared at her, dumbfounded by the new depths of manipulation she was stooping to. Finally finding my voice, I responded in a hoarse rasp. "You're lying. You don't have a single selfless bone in your body. There's no way you'd ever actually consider—" "Hurting my unborn child?" Elise's eyes flashed dangerously as she finished my sentence for me. "You're right. It would be unthinkable. But that's how low your vindictive crusade against me has driven your own cousin Rowan." "That's not true." I exploded, panic and anger swirling together in a volatile mix. "I never wanted to push you to that point. I was just what?" She cut me off icily. "Ruthlessly exposing my flaws and insecurities to everyone? Destroying any chance I had for a stable home for my baby?" My mouth opened and closed uselessly, all righteous indignation failing me. Elise nodded slowly, expression grave. "Yes, that's what I thought. Well, I sincerely hope you can live with that on your conscience." She cradled her swollen belly protectively. "For my child's sake, I have to put some distance between us. But this isn't over, Rowan. Not by a long shot." With that, she brushed past me toward the door, leaving me rooted in place and utterly stricken. What game was she playing at now? More to the point, how goddamn far was she truly willing to go? My hands clenched into tight fists as her ploy started sinking in, using her pregnancy as some twisted bargaining chip against me. I couldn't let her continue manipulating me like this. As the apartment door swung shut behind Elise, a single thought crystallized in my mind with decisive clarity. It was time to go scorched earth on my cousin's cruel mind games once and for all. After Elise's latest twisted performance in my apartment, I knew I couldn't let her shocking theatrics rattle me. She was becoming increasingly unhinged and desperate, probably because on some level she realized the jig was truly up this time. With Kate's help venting out my anger and disbelief over a couple bottles of wine, I regained my determination. Elise's manipulative schemes had gone far enough. It was time to hit her where it really hurt, her victimized public image. The next morning, I printed out a copy of her ludicrous suicide note and texted the family group chat. Since Elise seems so concerned about her well-being being impacted, I want to make sure you all see the latest evidence of how far she's willing to go for attention and pity. This was her latest ploy to guilt-trip me into submission after her other cons were exposed last week. I attached the file and sent it off, letting the words linger ominously as the implications sank in. Sure enough, the replies came swiftly. Oh my God, is this for real? Elise. Honey, what were you thinking? You can't be serious right now, Ro. This is taking things too far. I allowed the mixture of shock, skepticism, and condemnation to swell for a few minutes before adding my own response. I'm deadly serious. After Elise was caught lying and shown the evidence, she came barging into my apartment trying to emotionally manipulate me into surrendering with this garbage suicide script. Needless to say, it didn't work. My phone started blowing up with a barrage of new messages ranging from horrified to outright scathing towards Elise's actions. Smiling tightly, I knew my point had landed. There was no salvaging her stance as a helpless victim after this latest gambit. She had finally burned through any residual benefit of the doubt. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Frowning, I set down my phone and strode over to answer it. My jaw dropped when I found Elise standing on my doorstep, eyes red-rimmed from apparent crying. She clutched her phone in one hand with a white-knuckled grip. What the actual did you just do? The seething whisper that emerged was laced with pure venom. I arched an eyebrow coolly. Oh good, you got my group text. I figured it was time for a little truth, considering all your deranged lying. Elise's nostrils flared as her shoulders heaved with unchecked rage. You evil little You've completely destroyed me. With that, she hurled her phone straight at me with startling force. I barely had time to flinch before the screen shattered against my forehead, shards of glass slicing into my skin. A cry of pain escaped my lips as I stumbled back, hands flying to clutch at the bloody gash now seeping crimson. Whoa, Elise! Kate's shout rang out from somewhere behind us on the sidewalk before she came charging over. Elise twisted around, eyes wild and fists clenched like she was ready to throw down. Kate immediately inserted herself between us, shooting her an incredulous glare. Get the hell out of here before I call the cops! She spat at the clearly unhinged woman. You're insane! For a long moment, the two of them faced off as I clutched my bloody forehead and struggled not to pass out from the pain and shock. Finally, Elise seemed to catch herself, recoiling as if suddenly realizing the severity of her actions. Without a word, she whipped around and stalked towards her car parked haphazardly in my building's lot, throwing herself into the driver's seat. I watched through a haze as she peeled out recklessly onto the main street before disappearing around the corner. Jesus H. Christ, Kate breathed out, turning back to examine my injury with a grimace. Your cousin has officially gone bonkers. You okay? I nodded weakly, hand clamped tightly over the still-flowing wound. Yeah, I'm all right, but Elise has clearly crossed about a dozen lines back there. Kate let out a disbelieving chuckle as she guided me back towards my apartment. You think? I don't care how hormonal or pissed she is, that chick is off her rocker. She paused, giving me an appraising look. Still, I'm sensing you feel like you've gotten through to her in some weird way? A grim smile tugged at my lips behind my hand as the pieces started falling into place. Oh, I'm done trying to talk reason into that snake, but you're right. I think Elise just got the very loud and clear message that it's time to back off. My eyes narrowed as I reflected on her breakdown. While frightening, it also proved my point. I had finally cut through all her manipulation and lies and exposed the twisted person beneath. The violent outburst was her unstable mask cracking wide open. Whether the rest of my family wanted to accept it or not, Elise had revealed her true, toxic colors, and there was no going back to her innocent victim act after this. I only hoped this was the dramatic climax before I could finally get my life back. Little did I know, Elise still had one more sinister gambit to play. In the aftermath of Elise's explosive confrontation at my apartment, an uneasy calm settled over the next few weeks. To the family's credit, most of them seemed to finally grasp how unhinged and toxic her behavior had become. The damning, fake suicide note file I circulated was apparently the tipping point that dissolved any remaining sympathy. My Aunt Monica was the first to reach out, inviting me over for a long overdue heart-to-heart. "I can't begin to find the words to apologize for enabling Elise's deception for as long as we did," she said, eyes downcast with shame. "Your parents are still struggling to accept the dark reality, but I saw the truth for what it was." I nodded slowly, appreciating her remorse, even if it came late. I only wish it hadn't taken such an ugly wake-up call. What Elise tried to pull with that suicide manipulation, it was a new low, even for her. Monica's face hardened as she gave a grim nod. Clearly the girl has suffered some sort of break from reality. As disturbing as it is, it does provide a perspective on how dangerous her mindset has become. We lapsed into a pensive silence, both of us ruminating on the emotional turmoil that had engulfed the family ever since Elise's sudden appearance at my doorstep, pregnant and demanding refuge. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Well, I suppose now it's up to me to try and move forward, however I can, with or without the family's full understanding." Monica reached over and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "You have more support than you know, my dear. Elise's twisted games have opened many eyes that were too long willfully blinded before. Just take care of yourself first and foremost." Her words proved to be sage advice over the following weeks and months, as I slowly rebuilt my sense of peace and equilibrium. With Elise outwardly backing off, at least for the time being, I plunged myself into work commitments to reestablish a sense of normalcy. Of course, the process wasn't seamless. I still jumped at unexpected noises, always half bracing for another one of Elise's vindictive ploys to manifest without warning. And haunting reminders of her betrayal lingered in various ways. My external hard drive containing years of treasured photos had somehow gone missing from my apartment. Termites had inexplicably infested my dining room table, destroying the sentimental peace. But I refused to let her pettiness and toxic trail of destruction derail me entirely. Each time Kate and I uncovered another missing belonging or damaged memento, we'd simply roll our eyes and press on. "Girl is lucky this is all the payback she's getting after what she tried to pull," Kate remarked one night as we carried the sawdust remains of my table out to the curb. I snorted, hoisting my end higher with a grunt. "Trust me, I've thought about taking her crazy ass to court more times than I can count at this point. But I honestly just want to purge her from my life and move on." Kate eyed me approvingly. Spoken like someone refusing to stay stuck as the victim anymore. "That's the attitude, Ro. Take back your power." I smiled tightly, appreciating her unshakable loyalty more than I could say. With Kate's stalwart encouragement, I slowly reclaimed my sense of self-worth and redefined my perspective. Instead of dwelling on Elise's rampant toxicity that had brought so much turmoil and suffering, I chose to appreciate the increased self-assurance and conviction I developed in standing up for myself. I was no longer the passive, unassertive girl who got steamrolled and dismissed by manipulative relatives. I had staked a clear claim to my identity, woven from resilience, integrity, and the knowledge of how to firmly enforce my boundaries when violated. Glancing around my cozy apartment one morning a few months later, I felt a sense of hard-won serenity wash over me. All of Elise's scorched earth attempts to destabilize my world had failed to fully shake the foundation I had reinforced for myself. I was bruised and battered, yes, but not broken. As for what further drama might arise regarding her future machinations, well, I'd simply have to cross that bridge when I came to it. But this time, I wasn't the same idle passenger, just watching her disrupt everything in her wake. No, from here on out, she would be dealing with a battle-tested, self-possessed woman who was done playing games or placating toxic manipulation in the name of family. My newfound strength and resilience were here to stay, and God help anyone who tried to overstep those ironclad boundaries again.